augments and artifacts that can elevate rerolls into a very scary place. Although Warwick with Scepter is no longer one of those things. In terms of 4 cost, Alan, I think Rise is definitely the most viable and with many variations as well. But the rest of the field, do you think players are going to be, leaning towards 4 cost, toward Callista maybe?
Oh, I could be going on this one for hours and hours, but okay, let's try to keep it straight. In terms of 4 cost, it's very conditional. From pretty much viable lines that can just go level 8 without like significant lead into the lobby, without some very good opener, is just pretty much Callista. Other lines, like for example Rise, is a +1 conditional or like specific arguments requirement. However, we have also like Living Forge, certain comps, like you mentioned, it can elevate the rerolls to the certain spot, but that also means the certain 4 cost. Like we have Gwen, Fiora, they use the artifacts extremely well. Like we know this Trench Coat combinations, we know this Mana Zane Zonia combinations from the Gwen. All of those things can push those comps from being unviable because they just don't have enough tempo and they die out, to being actually competitive in that environment.
Well, let's start narrowing in on one aspect of the play. Of course, the set mechanic being charms. David, in terms of which charms are you most focused on coming into today?
Well, as a degenerate Talon reroll, 1 trick all the way back in set 6, without assassins being in this set any longer, I think the assassin charm is one that I love, mostly because if you're not scouting and someone picks this and suddenly your backline unit gets blown up, you feel very bad. So it's really a check on how locked in players are, how much they're scouting on these pivotal rounds in stage 4 and stage 5.
That's a great point. In terms of my favorite ones, I think I like Minor Gambit the most, because the moment where you see this guy having 4 win streak, picking Minor Gambit, he's already waiting to make 20 when he wins, and he suddenly loses, his mental is whole gone. Like it's over. You didn't get gold, you are not making econ. Like how to recover? The whole day is boom.
Well, we've also got as well the Xerath charms we've got on screen right now. Of course, we can see some of these very expensive and very high impact. Alan, again, do you think these are going to be a big part of today?
Oh, absolutely. Ironic Xerath early, so you are able to see those powerful Xerath charms is so strong. We can see that on the screen with Lalana with the Chariot in Shop charm. He did a really smart play during one of the cups where he just locked the Chariot charm once he had enough gold where he could have taken advantage of the charm, which allowed him to push level up or roll down bigger amount of the gold to try to hit. Again, great econ charm, but hey, if you don't hit, it doesn't matter, unfortunately.
All right, so just before, of course, with the first game going, just want to see, David, from your side of things, any other charms you want to bring into the forefront of mind coming into Game 1?
For the viewer experience, I think Polymorph is always interesting, especially when you mix in things like Build-A-Bot into Polymorph in Stage 3. There's some interesting combos that can get out of hand very quickly if you high roll.
I have to say, sorry to interrupt you, Canfit. I'm really curious if we're gonna see the famous French bench, which is Pandora bench, Silver Argument. They are known for hitting 3-star 4 costs left and right. So curious if we're gonna see one of those. Perhaps into earlier mentioned by Panda, major polymorph, some 5 cost. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you do need those high rolls if you're going to get to the Tactician's Crown. No matter how good you are, there's going to be that element of chance. But fortunately, if you're watching us here today and you've got any preferences in terms of who you'd like to see broadcasting here today, we have got you very much sorted out when it comes to our co-streamers. So if you do check the score sheet, then you'll be able to see links to all of our co-streamers which will be covering today's Golden Spatula, so you can enjoy today's event in the language of your choice. Of course, tons of incredible co-streamers to choose from, so please do play around and check who you like the best from there. But again, I think you'll have a very, very good experience whoever you choose. So now, It's almost time to begin. 32 players, 3 days of competition. When the Golden Spatula is done, we will have Amir's 9 best and brightest locked in to compete at the Magic and Mayhem Tactician's Crown next week. But only one of them will be our regional champion. With our first game almost ready to begin, let me introduce you to our casters for these crucial opening games of the tournament. Firstly, one of the rocks that Amir TFT Broadcasting has been built upon, Denmark's own Wita. And joining him, making her return to TFT Broadcasting, you know her from the LEC, you know her from the LPL, it's Trouble Inc.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that introduction. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Counterfeit. Welcome, everyone. We're just about to launch the first game of the weekend that we will finally crown the EMEA champion of this particular cup. I have with me Wita. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you feeling after this incredible introduction from Counterfeit?
I mean, yeah, I have to perspective, right? It's been a while, right? For 4 years, I've been doing this thing now, right? I've been crowning
the Rock of EMEA, man.
Yeah,
the Rock.
The Rock. I mean, I have too much hair to be the Rock, right? I think that's kind of a.
I was about to say you're gonna mention the turtleneck and the chain, you know.
Yeah, I don't have a turtleneck on today, right? Actually, I could just pull one out of the closet, but no, I think that we should pull out some great games out of the closet here, Trouble, because I am super excited to see what these players have been cooking up. We know there are kind of a little bit of differentiation in terms of what different practice groups have been doing, right? We've had a practice group that has been very big on hiding strats. People have been streaming scrims on the side as well. There are so many things that I'm just excited to see what people have been cooking up over the last few weeks.
Yeah, we'll talk about later about people who have been hiding scrims, as you mentioned, and not streaming anything. But also, I feel like the biggest part of why this is so hype is because we had the Lusha interview earlier on, and he pretty much said, hey, thank you to my study group. And there's so many players that have study groups, and they study together, and they learn the game together. Ultimately, only one person can win the entire cup. Only one can be the champion, right? However, he said at the very end, let's all get our points and all qualify to the Tactician's Crown to compete internationally. And I feel like this is a thing that you don't necessarily see, especially in competitive games that are solo driven.
No, not really, right? And I think that's a big thing, right? I have a huge background in card games, right? Where it's very often you win a tournament, that's kind of your entry in, or you get over the course of a points total. So it's very common to see those practice groups kind of come together. But when you have as many people from this practice group at the same event, that's kind of where things get a little bit murky, because you're all kind of on the same strats. You all kind of have expectations for where other people will go in these lobbies, and that could be a great information advantage, but can also end up being a hindrance. So kind of excited to see how these different players are going to be looking out, how people are going to approach this, because we've seen in the past as well with the KC Cousins, right, Trouble? That is a story as old as time when it comes to people contesting the same lines. We saw it in Vegas. We've seen it at every single EMEA Cup. It feels like for the last 4 years, these two players play very similar strategies. So I'm kind of excited to see how this will overlap.
Well, talking about the Casey Cousins, unfortunately, we're not going to have any of them in our first lobby. However, there's going to be a lot of French representation. Who do you have your eye on for the first lobby, Wita?
I mean, we have two of the players here from Hyros, right? Lusha and Elia, the two of the players that were talking about being in that practice group, and two players that I speak to every now and again as well. And Elia, a player that has played a lot of Rise this year, right? Has 13 games of Rise across every single cup. Opale has played nothing but Callista, and I think that's interesting as well. And also Clemu has been playing a ton of Varus lines, but the issue is, well, as you know, right, Varus right now is not in the best spot.
Honestly, if you high roll, maybe it's worth going towards that Arcana. You've got some emblems right there. We'll talk about the emblems later on, how easy it is to pretty much fixture your whole line from the very get-go. I feel like he's always been my bias when it comes to TFT, the Mr. Excel sheets himself, Solo Gizang, the guy who has been known for sort of not necessarily performing when the time is right, but also being one of the highest ladder warriors, always teaching people how to play lines at the very beginning of every set, has a very good grasp of what's good and what's not. And I feel like this is the time for Solo Gizang to step it up, especially when you've got another two German representatives in the exact same lobby as well, who are not necessarily in your study group.
No, and especially with solo as well. Until previous set, like he had the very unfortunate kind of record of being the player with the most final lobbies, without ever making it to a tactician's crown or world championship in the past, right? And I think that's a very big thing here. But also now we're going to be going in and kind of see the split decisions being made right now. We have Prismatic Prelude, we have Gold Opener. These are probably the two most popular choices in this lobby in terms of like standard power, because champion delivery trouble. It can be a little bit of a problematic situation at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody might high roll and get the champion that they actually need to finish up their composition. It is going to be... They literally just go one guide by your pal right there. It is going to be champion delivery. So you're going to be having a random champion on your bench every single stage that will get higher in terms of its cost as the game goes on, as the stages go on. Now, of course, having this in mind, do you think that a lot of people might actually change the strategy? Because we've seen things like Scholar lines, Portal lines, potentially Shapeshifter lines gravitate towards that to get that lucky 5 cost that you need to finish up your comp.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot more common with the conference, right, where you have the tailored unit coming through to just like alter their lines. I think for a lot of people, it's a very high roll situation because of the fact that twice per stage you can get those injunctions. Because sometimes like, you'll be playing a Scholar comp, you get a Rise, you get a Tarek or something, and meanwhile your opponent just like gets, I don't know, like a Fiora while they're playing.
A Varus. Like, oh, God.
Oh, Varus, right, yeah. You know, like, they're just like some random units that you can't necessarily make great use of, but also because of the fact that they can create some inconsistencies in the tempo spiking here. And speaking of potential tempo spikes here, right, looking at Elia's bench right now, 2 pairs of those multi-strikers, very clear direction, potentially being unoffered trouble. And that's something we've been speaking about a lot as well. Having clear direction from 2-1 is super important on this patch.
Now, one thing that makes it very important, right, is because you have a very clear line of what you want to play, but it also indicates to the opponents in that particular lobby what line you're going for. The whole me Ari / Defen, me Jinx Wukong / Defen doesn't necessarily work here, because if you do hit an augment that is specifically tailored to your line, that initially makes your line so much stronger when you're re-rolling it. Now, of course, having silver augments as the first choice is right here. The only thing that you can hit that will give you some sort of direction is if you get the random emblem potentially.
Yeah, branching out is definitely an interesting one to kind of work towards. We can see Enzo now going towards the Pandora's items, which is a really, really good augment in terms of the clear direction. We see Solgasang as well with one of the augments here, giving him a support item further down the road. Clemu also on keepers, like a lot of like either like clear combat power or like really backloaded power coming through further down the road.
I feel like 2 players have already made their intentions a little bit clear. Looking at Clemu, we've got the keepers right there. This is traditionally, if you know from previous sets, any duelists, multi-strikers, anything that's super squishy, loves to auto-attack, really, really does love those combat augments that give them a little bit more survivability. The more you survive, the more auto-attacks you get to put in. So I feel like Clemu might even be going towards something like the multi-striker line. And Elia also with the featherweight, you can very clearly see that he wants to reroll a line that is a 1-2 cost. And right now, seeing as you have a Poppy, a Lilia, and a Zoe on that board, Leah is going most likely for that Ari / Zoe that plagued the entirety of solo ranked on EU West at the very beginning of the set, if you will.
Yeah, and the big thing to note here as well is that I spoke to Leah a little while ago. I think that I practically landed on that comp being one of the best comps in the set, if not the best one at the moment, right? And I think that's pretty clear indications the fact that you get to start off on a line that you're super comfortable with. These first 2 games, these are the first 2 games out of 12, but we both know this, right, from competitive backgrounds. The fact that yes, you might have like a long season ahead of you, like a long event with like a lot of points all coming through, but starting off on a high note just does such a massive wonder on your mental. So super excited to see whether or not it actually is going to work out for Aaliyah here, because again, it's a comp, if it reaches the ceiling, it is going to be absolutely amazing.
Oh, and as we mentioned for Clemu, you see instantly he's got that Jax too, he's got that Kassadin Hecarim even on his board, paired Kassadin on the bench as well. This is a very clear multi-striker line. Now, of course, this is a very multifaceted sort of trait, if you will. There's so many different iterations of multi-striker you can play for. Back when Hecarim was one of the strongest units in the multi-striker line, it was also very heavily contested, right? A lot of Callistus around that needed the Hecarim. You had the Varus Arcana line that needed the Hecarim. Right now, you don't necessarily see that unit that much contested, and with a lot of other 3-star lines also being taken out of the pool, it sort of makes that Hecarim / Kassadin reroll a little bit easier to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to also kind of keep in mind here, looking at the benches, right? The Reforges being a very common commodity right now means that even though Clemu might be angling towards playing something like the Kassadin reroll here, he will not have to give up his Hecarim at any point throughout the game. We'll just reuse one of those Reforges. He gets one per stage if we don't have one on the bench. Very nice little resource that has been incredibly nice to have pumped into the game so far.
Absolutely. That was actually a great implementation, and I'm glad you actually mentioned it, because that is something that a lot of people who don't necessarily read all the patch notes don't know yet. So yeah, for everyone who is wondering, as Wita said, at every single neutrals pack, if you do not have a magnetic remover in your bench, you're going to get one for sure. So you can ping pong basically all of your items around and try to get the strongest board possible. Now, of course, right here, we do have the 3 multi-striker board with Keepers for Clemu. Extremely strong, especially when you've got a Hecarim with a Bloodthirster Slanted belt as well for a little bit more dominance in the early game. He's got that 3-win streak.
Just kind of looking again the overview of the lobby here. Travis with that Wukong already holding on to the Hunters here could be a clear indication of him wanting to go down this Jinx line, right? And I think that's a comp that also kind of has been like a little bit of a interesting kind of talking point all throughout the most recent few weeks, right? Because then like we got all the nerfs to all the Hunter trade and like Endless Hunt and all these augments, and then all of a sudden we get a compensation buff for Jinx, even with all the nerfs. That had to be removed. Right, so it's a comp that even though it has taken quite a few hits in recent times, it is still very, very powerful.
Absolutely, and talking about powerful comps, right here, Clemu, that BF sword was on a 1 cost, and ain't nobody want to touch a 1 cost, especially when you're around 2-4. You're usually about that point where you're either at still level 4, you don't want to level up, you grab a 2 cost or a 3 cost from the carousel, and you try to make that 20 gold, or you grab that one item that you really need to start snowballing. Of course, that BF sword was on a 1 cost, very luckily for Clemu. Doesn't get to make that gold, but he gets to at least try to keep that streak alive by slamming that Sterak's onto the Hecarim. Again, that 3 cost is still very potent, still very strong, especially on stage 2. And I feel like I haven't seen necessarily a single board that can take down Clemu. So it looks like a 5 streak for me right now.
Yeah, also a lot of gold invested into this board here, right? With a free cost,
Yeah.
you're pointing out, with like 2 free costs. Like, so he has to kind of maintain this win streak for as long as possible, or he's going to pay for all that interest he hasn't been making all throughout stage 2.
Ooh, I wonder, do you roll here? You do have a Kali paired, Hecarim paired. Now, of course, this is dependent on how strong the rest of the lobby is, and from what we have seen so far, it doesn't necessarily seem like the lobby is super strong, but you do have Enzo, who's also on a 4-win streak with 41 gold to his name. Not only is he winning, but he's also extremely rich going towards this first neutral round, and we'll see if they're going to end up meeting each other. It's not going to be the case, so at least for Clemu, it looks like a pretty easy win streak here.
Yeah, going into Elia's board here, right? Also making the Godbreaker, right? An item that kind of goes up in value when you have people on Keepers in the lobby. Getting that extra damage on top of those shields on the enemy team is a very strong item here. Also, in my opinion, one of the most slept on items in the game. I've been talking about this item pretty much all throughout the set. At the start of the set, I was a very big proponent of it. It was so strong with all of the portal stacking, with all the rise comps going around. It was a great item to work with in a strong tempo.
Sorry,
here,
is your name Riri Replay by any chance?
No.
Okay, because Riri Replay was a huge fan of Guardbreaker a couple of sets ago. He actually researched every single item and their win rate and how used it is. And Guardbreaker was the least used item back then with the highest win rate. So when he did go to the, well, what we call now Tactician's Crown, but basically the International as a World Championship, he slammed double Guardbreaker. And yeah, he actually did really, really well in that tournament. That's why Asha was like, hey, just in case, you're also a big fan of Guardbreaker.
Yeah, but it's a great tempo item, and I think that's something that a lot of people also kind of seem to steal on, because at times, in terms of like, regardless of which items are kind of meta in the game, it kills a lot of really awkward components for a couple of compositions as well here. But this 3-1 rolldown trouble will be very interesting here, because Elia and Enzo are both kind of looking for the same units as we speak.
Ouch, this one does not look good. You usually want to roll down to 30, trying to hit that Ari 2 to try and transition the items over. Just about hits that Ari 2. Has to go a little bit too deep when it comes to the gold pool right here, but he is going to hit his major units. Now, of course, no Lilia 2 is going to hurt. Primarily how this Ari comp is run is you want to use your Arcana onto that Ari, which means you gain more AP the more 3-star units you have. And usually those 3-star units would be either Zoe, Hoppy, Lilia, and of course your Ari. So far, because it is very heavily contested, even though many 1-cost units in the pool, it doesn't seem to be that easy to get that 3-star line.
No, and also a very big fight here as well for the overall economy of the lobby right now. These slams, the Cillian ability could come through with the stun, but no, this Ari will reign supreme for Enzo on level 4 here. Had to kill his economy. Now we'll be able to maintain the streak here. Had he lost that to Clemu with that middle lane roll down trouble, that could have been a big issue for him.
Absolutely. You saw Clemu also. He kind of looked a little bit frustrated with that. I mean, how can you not be the second you hit Ari 2? His items are incredible as well. The Gunblade for the healing, the extra AP coming through that death cap, as well as the blue buff. This is pretty much very close to Bis Ari, and he's hitting a lot of that 2-star frontline as well. So Clemu, as you mentioned, has pretty much sacrificed a lot of that gold to try and snowball those multi-strikers, and that's exactly what you want. These kind of lines really do spike through that stage 3, and if you don't snowball that stage 3 with Hecarim, with that Kassadin 2, it becomes a little bit strange later on stage 4, when a lot of those reroll lines have actually landed the 3 stars.
Yeah, and really interesting as well to kind of keep in mind, we saw Solo hit a freeze right there, going to level 6 on top of that, so... And a line I also wasn't expecting to see a lot of, but could be an opening potentially this week, was going to be this Blaster Vanguard line with the way in the backline here. But it's, generally speaking, I think it's a lot better when you have multiple people going for those free cost rerolls, because you kind of just need to hit this and then start pushing up afterwards. But it's going to be interesting to see whether or not it's going to be able to keep up with some of the more powerful compositions that kind of have made their way into the lobby now.
Joke's on you. Ari is superior to everything. Apparently right here. Very good stuff from Enzo. Again, he had to dig really deep into that gold pool, and a lot of the times you do not even need to 3-star your Ari. As long as you've got a bunch of really strong units in the front to tank for Ari, so you can give time for her to ramp up with her Foxfires, you can actually move that line onto a 6 Bastion really quickly and just make a very, very durable front line and allow Ari, even as a 2-star, to sort of marinate in the background with the Foxfires. However, you will need a couple of 3-star units to just get that Arcana power through.
I mean, I was just looking at that Conjure emblem for a long time, just like imagine if you had Arcana or Bastion, right? You know,
oh my god.
That would have been absolutely incredible, but no, we're not going to go down that route. We see that Solgasang has played a more tempo-oriented version of this Soraka free here. And with these items also pretty clear that it probably won't end up being the primary carry of the composition here, holding on to Vex and Veigar. And it's kind of like the dichotomy of the mage lines at the moment, right? Trouble, you're talking about this with me yesterday as well, but the fact of like, you have so many different ways of kind of approaching the mage lines. So you have the Soraka Seraphine line, and you have the Vex Veigar line as well.
Yeah, you even have a third version right there, because I feel like Solgasang is doing the third version where if you're going to hit either one Soraka or Seraphine 3, you just stick on that and you don't necessarily reroll the other one unless you've hit a lot of Blitzcranks. So you can do the Soraka Seraphine with Vanguard frontline, Soraka Seraphine with Vex frontline. That's if you don't hit a lot of Blitzcranks, another 1 cost. And then you of course have the Vex Veigar that you've also mentioned. I feel like right here, because Solgasang did not necessarily hit a lot of those Vanguard 1 costs in the frontline, he's securing his Soraka 3, which is more than good enough to carry him through that stage 3, and over in stage 4, he's going to be rerolling then for that Veigar and Vex to complete that composition.
Yeah, Tricia now having a pretty important roll down here on level 7, trying to get some upgrades to this front line. Also, most importantly, trying to get an upgrade to this way in the backline, just to upgrade this damage output. A very big lack right now as well, a lack of frontline items. Draenus Omen has come through, and with a pretty big investment here, we're not on Mordekaiser 2, we're not on Way 2. Like, we are lacking so much frontline, even with that Bard 2, at least being an upgrade to the backline.
Luckily, you do have at least one of those dummies in the front line, but Way being a 1-star right there, it's just not quite going to be enough. And we've seen a lot of iterations of the Wei line as well. You've seen the Blaster iteration, and we've also seen the iteration, of course, where Bard is your secondary carry. Of course, if you do hit a lot of AD items, you do have to go the Ezreal / Wei line right here. But I feel like Etre is in a pretty good spot to try and just go for that Wei plus Scholar. He does have the 2-star Bard. It really does hurt how he's rolling down to try and get some upgrades. There you go, the double Wei shop. That's huge.
It's absolutely big here as well. Etre is also a player that some people kind of have some question marks going into this event with, because he won the first Editions Cup of the set, which, generally speaking, can kind of be a... Like, it obviously is a huge thing. You win a cup and it's a big thing, but he's also a player that hasn't had a ton of competitive success before or really after either, right? He's a player that's kind of been coming into the mix since the start of last year, probably, I would say. Kind of been working himself as a player, and I think this is a big kind of indicator of where we can expect to see him in the future if he's able to mix it with the best here for this weekend.
Absolutely, pivotal importance. Love that you mentioned the storylines of the players as well, and see what their competitive background looks like. And, you know, depending on how many expectations you come into the game with, sometimes it frees a lot of that burden that you carried to perform. I think we heard it from Lusha earlier on in the pre-show as well, when he was having his interviews, like, hey, I'm coming into this one with not a lot of expectations. There is not much pressure. I wasn't even planning on competing, so whatever place I get, that's good enough for me, no pressure. And we've seen this throughout a lot of esports. The less expectation, the less burden of execution there is on your back, the better you do perform. So let's see how that works out for our players. Now, of course, lovely that we're seeing Enzo's line here as well, because we mentioned how important it is to hit a lot of his 3-star units to get that Arcana rolling, and he seems to be very close. Oh, that gold! That's a lot of rolling.
Medical coming through trouble. That could be an issue for the rest of the lobby here, depending. But now, again, we're going to see more of these 4-stars. Forecast, sorry, even coming through here. 4-stars not quite on the menu just yet. They could be on the menu at some point this weekend, though. We gotta keep an eye out for that as well.
Oh, he had to level to that level 6 here to try and keep that Nunu. He's 1 off of 3-star Nunu as well. 2 off Ahri, 1 off Nunu. A couple off of that Lily, but he's going to give up on the Lily and go for the Poppy instead.
Yeah, and there it is, the instant reward here coming through as well. Looking for the last copy of Ahri's been talking about before. Elia also on that line, so kind of just eating into that pack of units right now. But we can see here on the side of Clemu has gone down some of the lines here, has that answer heal on the Callisto with the shred from the Obsidian from the Cleaver here, right? So a lot of really strong boards kind of starting to come together here.
And as we mentioned, multi-strikers, especially when you do have a Hecarim and a Callisto with the shred and the anti-heal, as you mentioned, is going to be a very, very strong line, and you want to be pretty much snowballing stage 3, but as we mentioned in stage number 4, especially all those reroll compositions, you're looking for that neutrals before stage 4 to roll it the heck down and hit all your 3-stars, and that's exactly what's happening. So right here, Clemu might have a little bit of an issue unless he hits towards that Hecarim 3. Again, 1 off Ahri 3 for Enzo.
And we see here Lusha going in towards one of the other Scholar lines here, with the Rise being the centered part of the carry setup here, right? But struggling to find that Ahri, like he's just struggling to find any 2-star upgrades on this board besides that Hecarim. And that is going to be a huge issue as well here. Got to figure out which items do you actually want to put onto this Rise right now. It's a lot of thinking going on here, and also a lot of components and items are kind of stuck here on the board as well. This is going to be a very busy turn.
There you go. Chooses a Giant Slayer to be his radiant item, and oh, that's Zephyr coming in clutch from Etre, taking the Rise up in the air. Again, Rise is one of those units where you really need that stacking AP, so when he does cast, he does prove to be very, very useful in this fight. However, if you do not have Archangels or Deathcap, it becomes a little bit of a Mosquito build, I want to say. I kind of used it from the Jhin build over in League of Legends. That's how Rise feels as well. He doesn't have like a heavy AP item on him.
Yeah, so we're kind of trying to make up with this with a very heavy frequency of casts here, right? With a combination of the Mana Stain as well as the Nashor's Tooth here. And also an interesting thing with going for the Demon Slayer as the Radiant upgrade here coming through is the fact that we're seeing so much reroll in the lobby, meaning that the HP totals, they will be much, much higher than they are in a normal lobby, right? So you might get even more value out of that upgrade compared to something like an Archangel, which probably would still be much preferred, and just in terms of like general power level here. But a nice little kind of way of kind of just stabilizing, kind of like looking at how I'm going to adapt to the lobby.
Absolutely, and we talked earlier on about a lot of the reroll competitions that we're going to be seeing, and we've seen a bunch of them, but we do see the odd rise with the Scholar right here, especially since Lucia did get the emblem as well from his second augment, but also the Callista line coming through, having that Fishbones and the Radiant Rage Blade is going to be a lot of damage coming through that Callista. However, we've seen that both our 4-cost players right here, Lucia and Opal, they've been stuck on so many pairs on their 4-costs.
Yeah, and a big reason why, right, you're looking at Clemul looking on to holding onto those Callistas as well here, going down that like pure multi-striker line, kind of in the same vein as the one Opal is going for here. And again, it's a big thing to note here as well, is the fact that Opal has kind of been playing these Callista Ferial-centric lines all throughout the set, so he's very, very familiar with every inch and cranny of these kind of ways of getting the most out of the Callista units.
Now, Lucia has Young Wild and Free, and he has picked that Spatula first. We could potentially be seeing something like a Portal +1, or potentially even a Scholar +1, if he does have... I'm bugging right now in my head, but the one basically that turns everything from a spatula to a frying pan to try and go for that Scholar. Because reminder, he is on that line, he is playing the Rise 6 Scholar is where that line really does shine. He does have the Scholar +1. Now, if you do have 2, you don't necessarily have to rely on getting to that level 9 and trying to hit that Milio.
But also just making a Portal +1 once you get to level 9 will give you a lot of really interesting kind of positions to work through. But also, speaking of interesting positions, Trouble, we haven't spoken about Travis's spot at all this game, because he's going in towards that shifted to reroll line with the Cassiopeia being the front and center carry for now.
Now let's see. We have a very slight pause right here. We'll be back with you very shortly. When we do know what's happening, we'll let you guys know. Don't worry about it. Now, so far, so good. We have had a few lines that have showed up, and we are resuming right here to see what our players will be grabbing from the carousel. There is a prize right there as well, but of course, a lot of the players are going for what will complete their items instead. Again, very surprisingly here, Wita Clemo has stayed on the top when it comes to that HP bar, even though his win streak has been broken twice by that Ari reroll.
Yeah, but even just like playing this aggressively here can be an absolutely massive bonus, right? Looking at this now, Opal picking up the Rise from that from the champion delivery here. Can just hold on to that for a while, just be a little bit of a nuisance to the rest of the lobby trying to hit that unit here. Getting that Recon 2 upgrade though for the front line here is going to be a massive boost, just buy so much time for this Callista.
Opal also holding the Rise, stopping anyone else, taking it out the pool. Very, very important. Every single seeding matters right here, and we see that there is a flex player on the other side. 2 Blighting Jewels onto that Karma. You really need to be hitting those 3 stars when you are going for that line. Let's see how that one goes.
Yeah, an interesting thing to note here as well, right? This is Clemu's spot that has been turned into a what the forts position.
Hold up, I just realized.
Just going in there, right? Like we're kind of operating a little bit on a little bit of delay here. It seems like it's the first game of the day, Trouble. I feel like we're excused, right? There's so many interesting things going on in this lobby right now. But as you were talking about, hitting those 2 stars when you are playing those Karma, Fiora, Gwen lines is super critical, because you need to have those upgrades to make great use of those additional items here. Something that we heard David, I believe, talk about at the top of the pre-show, right? The fact that these What the Forge compositions, they can be incredibly powerful, but they really do need to hit those nice little boosts to really start contesting for the rest of the lobby.
I feel like Clemu is at a fantastic spot, especially because I saw he was an 80 gold, level 8. He's